Hello there, welcome back to another set of shows. Today I'm going to start off with four films, all within with the same, pretty much the same idea, which is post-nuclear doomsday, which is the bombs have either are about to go off in the film or they have gone off. So two of the films, it's the build-up and the aftermath, and the other two you just get the aftermath. So I'm going to look at four films. I've already covered this subject a little bit when I did the War Game with Peter Watkins, which is still the great post-nuclear bomb film. You know, it's still the best one. Although there's one close competitor on this bunch I'm going to talk about. Now, obviously, the Oppenheimer's about to come out as I record this, or in some places it has come out, and it's the making of the bomb. I've also covered Fat Man and Little Boy, which is the Roland Joffe, Bruce Robinson film from the late 80s about this subject matter. I've yet to see Oppenheimer, but I'll be seeing it in the next few days. So I'll get back on that one, what it's like. But I thought it'd be quite nice to actually watch these films all about the aftermath of what could happen with these nuclear weapons. So it's a genre that it's usually used in the Mad Max or Key where you get a nuclear bomb go off, but the after effects are never that serious. It seems in these films compared to the film we're going to cover now, where it's the war has gone to hell. The world has gone to hell because of the war. I mean, you get films like The Matrix and the Terminator films, which have that kind of idea as well, but they're still rooted in fantasy, like the kind of savior figure that's going to come out. In these films, there's no such possibility of a savior figure. There's no possibility of survival. It's just continuing misery. So the film I'm going to talk about are Threads, The Day After, The Road, and Aftermath. So these are four films of varying budget levels. I mean, Threads and Aftermath are the low budget ones, really. They're the ones with much less money spent on them. Day After was a TV movie. It was made by a mini series, but it's cut down to a TV to a one film because the director Nicholas Miller said there wasn't enough. It was just too. There were things in there, the original script, it was you didn't need. So it was more effective just as a 2-hour film. You know, and The Road is a kind of fairly decent sized budget film, using what it can to create a world that's gone completely haywire. It's based on a novel by Cormac McCarthy, so that's the one with the kind of literary credentials. But that doesn't mean it's the best one, because it's not. Right, I'll start off. The Day After was the first one out, so I'll start with that one, even though I watched Threads before I watched The Day After. I watched both of them. I had the DVDs of both of them. I saw Aftermath on streaming, and I saw The Road on a Blu-ray. So it was a variety of different formats to watch these films. The Day After is, for me, the kind of weakest of the bunch, really. It's the film that has good moments, but it is made in the early 80s in America, and they don't want to offend people. Threads came out, I think, just after it, but both films were in development for a while. So it's a subject that they were doing like mini series like World War III and things like that. So it was in the air because of all the world terror of what could happen with these nuclear weapons. This was based on world was going from look how many weapons we have to, oh, this is a bad idea. Maybe we should try and cut these down. So it was this Threads and Day After are the kind of two films that were big things to get people aware of the threats, because people just saw it in terms of we have nuclear weapons. I mean, we had Dr. Strangelove in the 60s parodying the whole mad defense system. I've covered that in another video. We had, you know, films about it. I mean, the War Game was banned from BBC for years. It was so accurate. But The Day After was America's first attempt to talk about the bomb. And they did it the best they can, which means you have a lot of very kind of sentimental storylines and it's very soap opera in some ways early on, but they do kill most people off pretty brutally. So even though you've got this thing to get people in, like, because in the 80s in America, a lot of filmmaking had come back from the 70s kind of grit, and they went towards more soap opera-ish and simplistic characterization. You know, you had on one hand the blockbusters like Rambo and things like that. Ooh, I've just knocked down my light. Isn't that great? I'll be back. Oh, give me a second. I'll get it back. That's it. So I should have washed my arms. So yeah, you'd Rambo and you'd simplistic characterization in a lot of these films. A lot of the popular films are very characteristically simplistic. By the late 80s, that was moving away again. But at a certain point, it seemed America and early Reaganism liked comfort food. So this film had to grab the American audience in the language they understood and then give them the shock. So for me, it's a bit sentimental and silly in places. But for the intended audience, it did the job. It really scared the hell out of them. So it's like one of those things is like, if you know a lot of the bomb, this one feels sentimental. But if you don't, it probably would scare the hell out of you. So it's directed by Nicholas Meyer. He didn't write it. And that's a big thing. Nicholas Meyer had come off Time After Time, which he'd written and directed. He'd come off Star Trek 2, which he had directed, but it was pretty well known he'd rewritten it. So, you know, he'd done his own thing with it, and he'd shaped that project. And this time it was a pre-existing script written by a writer who was well known. So Meyer had certain things he could do, certain things he couldn't do. So even though he was a novelist with 7% solution, things like that, there was some sort of limit. So and some of the scripting is some of the problems the film has is like it is catering to an audience to not terrify them too much until they want them terrified. And to me, it's kind of annoying. So Meyer actually brings in some good actors. You've got Jason Robards as the lead, and you've got a bunch of other actors. You've got John Lithgow in a smaller part. You've got a bunch of TV actors you'll know. You've Steve Guttenberg in a smaller part. This was before he was well known. This was before like Police Academy was big. This was just like it's after Diner, so he was kind of like just a working actor who was getting well known but wasn't a star yet for that very brief period in the 80s. So it was kind of a situation where you had some big names or well-known names, but Meyer did not want to have it like populated by people you know. So there's a lot of parts with actors you'll never hear from again, and they're done pretty well. They're actually preferable to the big names because the big names just distract you from the film, and that's kind of an issue. But the film works quite well in the build-up, the sense that something's going wrong, in the sense that people aren't quite sure what to think. People are thieving what's going on, but not quite sure. Some people are trying to know as much as they can and get on with their lives. And the situation is worse, and suddenly the bombs go off. Like, no one knows who started it. No one knows how to react to it. It's just like, oh, this is part of our lives now. The bombs have gone off. And you see the after effects, which are kind of brutal, but not really brutal. I've seen much worse after effects in films. This one feels like it wants to take a slow approach. So you have characters who, like Jason Robards, who gets to his hospital where he works, and he sets up a hospital, and you see him slowly succumbing to radiation sickness. You see his medical staff try to help people, and they're the center for everyone to go to. So that's the focus of the second half of the film is people try to get to this thing and realizing there's only so much they can do for you, and if you have very radiation sickness, you're you're probably going to die, and it's just a waiting game. And the strength of the film is through that. That's what's better about the film. And there's also the idea that they don't have any real precautions there. They don't. No one really takes the threat of nuclear war too seriously. It's like no one expects it to happen, like ever. So that definitely is an impactful part of the film. But Fred's does it better though. The the sense of doom is there, but it's a bit polite. It's so polite that at the end it says, in all likelihood, after all the horrors I've seen here, what would happen in real life would be much more severe. Which is true, because it's just this one. Some of the effects are not great when you see people turn into skeletons. That's just so 80s. They have stock footage of nuclear tests. They have lots of things, and they've got they're just jumping from character to character so much, and there's just the pacing just doesn't feel right a lot of the time. It just feels like it's too many characters, and everything's diluted. And even when you get the character scenes, a lot of the time it feels like a soap opera or a very basic drama where you know the dialogue before they speak it. And even some of Jason Robards, who's a great actor, he's trying to deliver lines which aren't worthy of him a lot of the time. And he's doing his best because he believes in the subject, obviously. He's probably doing this for the subject matter more than the quality of the script. So he has to deliver stuff that's a bit corny at times. So that's the day after. The day after is worth seeing, but there are better films out. And all the other three films I'm hitting everything today. The other three films I'm going to talk about, I would say are superior to the day after. The day after is actually probably easier on you than the other ones in other ways. Even Aftermath, which is a low budget film, pretty much set in a one location, annoyances that the day after has. I mean, Aftermath is probably the second weakest of the four films, but it's still. I would happier watch that one again after and day after, because day after just has some things that really are irritating, and it's like I know this situation would be much worse than they're showing, and there are moments where they show you like the kind of a landscape of dead bodies and things which really affect people. But there's also Amy Madigan in it, a young Amy Madigan playing this woman who's about to give birth when the bombs go off, and she keeps the baby inside herself for so long to keep it safe before she finally gives birth, and it just feels absurd. The way they do it, it's a soap opera thing. It just does not feel right, and that goes through the film. Is like there are moments where they don't want to do too much. Even the kind of ravagers of people who are trying to survive and take the law into their own hands towards the end are still stock characters, are not that intimidating. So it's worth watching, but it's nowhere near Nicholas Mayer's better. It's not one of his better films. Now we go on to Threads. Threads is great. Threads is the problem I had with the day after is I watched it after Threads, like the day after Threads, and Threads is so superior to it in like every possible way. Again, it's the same situation. It's almost similar crisis dealing with the Middle East and Israel and things like that. And then into the first like 30, 40 minutes you're watching this thing go out of control as these people try to get on their lives. And some people are scared it's going to happen. Some people try to get on their lives. Some people are oblivious. But you actually go into the government at times to see them try to prepare, and you realise they are out of their depth and they are panicking because it's like there's no way to prepare for this if it goes off, and then suddenly goes off, and and the film takes place in Sheffield, and it gets nuked close to Sheffield, and it's brutal. Now, one of the things this film does is it sets up characters in the first half of the film who die in the nuclear blasts. Like, there's some characters who you think are going to be big players in the second half of the film who are dead. just as nuclear blast hits. That's ballsy, but also actually makes it much more realistic because like that's them telling you like nobody's safe in this film. And as the film goes on, people who were like in government who you think are the safer of the characters, they bite it too. They're really there's nowhere that's safe. And this deals with all sorts of things like post-nuclear burns that are horrific. Like people with half their face burnt off. I mean, people get blinded. You know, children die. Everything is like it's basically it's how much can we get on TV, and that's as much as they put on TV. They really are trying to put as much on as they can, and it is really brutal. Now, I actually used to stay in Sheffield, but I stayed like 10 years after this film was made, so it's quite interesting. Sheffield had changed a little bit since then; it become more modernised, but there's other bits of it that hadn't changed. There's a really ugly building in this film that I recognise from my days in Sheffield, and even though it was nuclear Armageddon, I was quite happy to see that building destroyed in the show because I hated that building when I was living there. It looked very weird, and when you see it in the show, it's like, who would build that? That's a little aside. But the film is really brutal. The film really delivers on the I can't believe I'm watching something like this on TV because it really goes after the war game idea that Peter Watkins had, which was show people how bad it's going to be. Just show them this is horrific. There's no way out of this. There's nothing that you can do when this goes off. It's going to be a nightmare for everybody. There's no safety. Like if you're young or old, basically if your body's either building or decaying, nuclear blast is radiation is going to destroy you. There's no way you're going to survive. The only people who could possibly survive after the blast, if they're far enough away from the radiation centers, and if they're a certain age and they're fairly healthy, they might survive the nuclear winter that follows. But even then, who knows? And it's the main character essentially is this woman who's pregnant before it starts. The baby is born after Armageddon comes, and she has to protect the baby at a certain point. She has to try and protect her parents who are aging, and that's a tragic story. There's looters, there's people from various backgrounds. Everyone's devastated. Everyone's lost someone vitally important to them. People have lost entire families and are trying to move on, and they can't. But as none of this is done in the kind of Americanized thing they're doing day after. This is just like, these are the facts of my situation. Now I have to try and move on the best I can, and then next time you see them, they're dead. It is brutal. Just like the body count in this thing is astonishing, and that's what gives it its impact. Is like everybody you like at the beginning of this film will die at some point. No one's escaping, and you also see variations of survival techniques. Some people remain kind. Some people become survivors. There's just a variety of approaches, and then it also goes on to what happens after what happens to the few people who survive the nuclear winter, where at that point you can grow some basic crops, but people are still starving. And what happens then, where people are still feeling the effects of nuclear blast years later? What happens to the children who have no education, and the language and the culture and everything from that old civilization is dead, and people are no longer brought up with an understanding of what it takes to build a society. They're just survivors, and some people are trying to help, and other people are like rapists and just horrible people who kill anybody for food. And it's just a non-stop survival instinct of how can you get food every day to survive in this landscape. And it's just horrifying. and further horrifics and further horrifics. It's just non-stop. It's like, yeah, this is not something anybody would ever want. This is just like you instantly go into the worst of what would be Middle Ages plague era, behavior straight away. So that's Threads is amazing. I'd recommend you try and see that. It's on DVD, but it's also been re-released and remastered for Blu-ray, which I've not seen yet, but I'm definitely going to buy it at some point. Now we have The Road. The Road is the Cormac McCarthy adaptation, stars Viggo Mortensen, and you have some other actors like Charlize Theron coming in at some point. She plays a wife. There's other actors like Guy Pearce shows up. Michael Williams from The Wire. Michael K. Williams from The Wire. And they pop up every so often, people you recognise. Now, the big criticism of this film after it came out was that the actual book was stronger because the book actually was less dour. I've not read the book. I've got it, but I haven't read it. Because the film is heavy going. The film really... It's powerful because it keeps you going and how horrific it is to survive. So this film pretty much takes place in what would be the second half of Threads of the war has come and gone, and how do you survive the devastation of what's left. You have people resorting to cannibalism. You have to avoid those gangs of cannibals. There's a scene in the house where people have grabbed anybody's passing by and locked them down in a cellar so they can cut up body parts and eat them. It's just the worst of humanity. And Mortensen's trying to take his son and keep him alive through this time, hoping to try to get to the coast and hoping there's something there that can work for them. And eventually they get there and they realize it's just the same. And it's just trying to survive with this kid who's just a kid who's trying to survive, and how did he manage? And Mortensen's trying to keep himself alive to help his child grow up. And he's trying to teach him how to survive, but he's also not trying to avoid making him a monster. And that's a difficult schism in his skills, really, because he's like, to survive, he has to teach him how to be brutal, but he doesn't want his son to be that way. So it's like, what do you do in that situation? So the plus point is the atmosphere. The atmosphere of the film is great. I mean, they really spent a lot of money and all the time on going through the landscapes where the trees have been burnt out and towns are just lying there dead and no one's helping each other. And everyone knows no one's going to help each other. There's a scene with Robert Duvall in it, and he's an old man who's blind or half blind, and they give him a little food. But that's as far as I'm going to go with him. And it's like that thing of, yeah, we're sorry, but we have to try. Morrison's like, I have to try and keep my son alive. And Duvall's actually okay with it. He understands what's going on. And it's just this thing of these different lives that are floating through this landscape, and as these people try and survive hell, basically. And that's the power of the film. But it means the film is an hour 45, and it's a film that should have been about an hour and a half, like an hour 25. Because I think because it's so depressing, there's only so long you can take that. And I think it outstays welcome a little bit. So you end up feeling like you want something more from it beyond the depression, and it doesn't really give you that. So that's the downside of the film. It's really well made, it's well acted, but it's acted in a way it's not directed brilliantly for the actors. The actors are kind of encouraged to give performances, a very filmic, award-worthy performances that I find, and that goes against the atmosphere of the film. And you just feel you wish they'd pulled people back even further in the performances to so that when those humanity would shine through more. But instead, you get character actors playing character actor parts in the apocalypse, and it becomes very much an actor's studio thing where people are performing, and it takes you out the film at times. So that's the downside of the film, is it's too long and some of the acting feels a bit mannered. Finally, we have Aftermath. which is the lowest budget one here, I think. I think even if you accounted for inflation, I think even Threads would have probably cost more from counting for inflation. Like Aftermath pretty much takes place in this cellar of this house after the apocalypse. We start with a doctor who is walking pretty much. He's walking the land after he just graduated, and and I think the sense is he's broken up with somebody. He's trying to kind of get over that, and he just graduated, so he's going for a long walk before he goes on to his next part of his life as a doctor, really as a professional doctor. So he's walking the land when the nuclear bombs go off. He at the time he's physically close to this other car that gets taken down. The power's taken down by the nuclear blast. And this is a woman and her son. Her son gets blinded, and they have to go and try and find a car that was turned off and still has power. They can actually get power to it. They do that, and they start running into a few other people, and they get to this farmhouse, which has a cellar. Which is the whole thing about this thing is, you get a cellar, you block off the outside, so they're trying to get the radiation poison from getting into you, so you're kind of secure through the worst of the radiation sickness. So that's what they do. There's a guy there who's a bit slow, and a few of his neighbours are there, and they go into that cellar, and they're down there for most of the film. And the film's about them in the cellar, trying to figure out what's happened to the world. Is there any communication? Is there any infrastructure left? And their own demons. Now, the weakness of the film is the fact that some of the actors, like in The Road, are trying a bit too hard, and it's almost like an actor studio situation. That's the kind of downside of it. Well, they're just trying too hard, and it can vary from scene to scene. And the thing is, you can tell who are the more experienced actors here straight away, because they're the ones that are not doing that. So you have Andrew Royal from The Wire as well. So The Wire seems to have a lot of post-apocalyptic film experience, and Edward Furlong, who is one of the survivors, and you can tell straight away they're the experienced actors, because even though they both have parts that are the more colourful parts, they actually know to underplay it a lot until it's needed not to actually work with the other actors, and it's not just about them, and it's not like, this is my close-up, everyone needs to get lost. There's that thing of they just know what's going to work in the scene, and you can just tell straight away, because if we compare them to other actors who are doing things they were taught in acting school, and so it sometimes gets in the way. Now, this isn't too bad. It's just sometimes you'd notice it in the film, and you'd be like, please don't do that. That's not the best way to do that. But they do it sometimes. It's just the way it goes. It's a low budget film. They probably had a limited budget for actors, and I think it's just a case of the lead actor's okay as he goes on, but early parts he's a bit stiff, and some of the other actors, they're not amazing, but the film still works what it is, which is a low budget look at the aftermath of a nuclear bomb. As the film goes on, they have to protect their area from the farmhouse from attacking people who are caught out, and we're caught out with the blast, who have suffered from severe radiation poison and want inside to get the supplies they have. So they're not fighting like zombies; they're fighting other people, and that's what gives the film a bit more of a kick. Is it's like they're killing people who are probably neighbours that they probably know. The action scenes aren't the best because they have a low budget. They also have an annoying thing with freeze framing during an action scene that does not work, and it should have just said, "No, we're not doing that. Stop that." That's the kind of annoying bit of it. But generally, the scene by scene thing is you see people who you know are not going to survive, and you see them slowly lose their place. There are some cliches of the guy with the pregnant wife, which is in this case is Furlong, but his wife's pregnant, and you know that baby's doomed. And it's about how he reacts to it. There is some humor to it because they're in a bad situation, and some people, even when things get tough, have funny lines here or there of people how they would react. Like at one point, Furlong gets shot, and someone asks if he's okay, and he's like, "Of course I'm not okay." It's like, what kind of questions that? And things like that actually come up once in a while. But again, they come up through the more experienced actors. It's like you can tell that like certain actors know how to react in a situation that's not just but films. It's about how would someone react in this situation. So there's things like that which help the film. But I mean, despite its flaws and its obvious low budget, it is enjoyably done. It's not as doomed as in the road or Threads. So there is a bit of American cheese there, or genre cheese you get from Day After, but it's not as bad as the Day After for all of that. It's still fairly restrained. So again, it's 90 minutes. It's not a long film. Unlike the other ones, it does have a fairly dark ending. I mean, The Road is probably the one with the least bleak ending of them all. And that's just a little bit of hope, which the other films don't have. But I would say all of them are worth seeing. They've all got things in them that are worth seeing. It's just that Threads is like far and away the best of the four. Threads, if you want to see any of them, see Threads. It's by far the superior film. Then I'd say see The Road and Aftermath. They are good films with flaws. And The Day After, if you can take the American 80s cheese, is worth seeing, but there's a lot of cheese there. So that's the 4 films. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll get back about Oppenheimer once I've seen it. But I thought it'd be worth talking about. But most of all, I should say is if you can see The War Game by Peter Watkins, that's the one to see. That will give you nightmares. So that's one to see. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'll be back soon with another video, but that's me for now. Bye.